it is that fear of losing power that we ultimately drives the purchase, right? And so there's a tension for us as marketers to say, how much do we want to play on that fear versus how much do we want to flip it and really talk about the benefit or the end state where you've sort of eliminated that.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Marketing Vanguard podcast. I'm Jenny Rooney at Adweek. I'm thrilled to sit down with CMOs from so many different types of companies, coming from so many different sectors, whether they be B2B, B2C, and everything in between. And it's really a fortune of mine to be able to do this podcast because it enables me to meet new CMOs every day and learn more about how the marketing leadership landscape is populated with people like Amanda Teeter, who's joining me today. Amanda is the CMO of Generac Power Systems. I'm sure that you know this company if you, like I, live in a place that is frequently losing power, and you need your generator to kick on to make sure that you can continue to live your life without disruption. So, Amanda, I have to say that's a brand that I'm sure people have a lot of affinity for in their personal lives. So, Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, people have a lot of affinity for the brand and we want them to have even more. So,
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, look, I don't know if many people are as familiar with, the home generator category. Um, Again, they might be familiar just because they happen to live in a region of this country that where generators are pretty necessary given storms and things like that. But from, just tell us about the category. What's the competitive landscape and what might people, especially your peer CMOs, be surprised by in the category?
yeah. So Generac is a 60-year-old company, and we kind of invented the standby generator back in the day. And it's really a product that automatically sort of restores your power when the power goes out. And we've now been growing that business for many years, and we've started to transition into a broader set of power solutions as well, and both on the consumer side and the industrial side of the business. But as you think about that standby generator business, we really provide peace of mind for people, right? Their power goes out, and that can create a lot of disruptions in their lives, depending upon who they are and kind of their background. That can show up in a lot of different ways. And so people get to a point of, frustration with losing power where they don't want to have that inconvenience or that threat even in their lives anymore. And so we really focus on helping to bring them that peace of mind. And it's a totally discretionary category with a low household penetration and relatively low awareness. And so marketing is a super important tool to help people understand how we can help them solve their problem and being there at that moment in time that's most relevant for them when the problem starts to kind of peak and they experience power outages, or they're reminded of that time when they did and they feel like, gosh, that's not something I want to experience again.
Well, it's interesting because it's the kind of thing where, first of all, they're not cheap. I mean, this is an out. You have to be committed from a financial standpoint that this is something you feel you need to do. So my question is getting at this concept of you're not marketing yourself against the competition, because I would argue, I mean, yes, there are competitive products out there, but it feels like you're the category leader from a brand.
We're definitely the category leader. Yeah, and the question for consumers when they get into this mindset of, okay, I need to solve this problem, is really less about which solution should I purchase, and it's more about, am I ready to make this investment? Because it's sort of a small construction project, if you think about it, right? Where you're having this sort of machine installed, and sometimes there can be trenching that needs to happen in the yard, right? So there's like to get the gas lines in place and things. So there's elements of a small construction project, and people have to feel like they're really ready for that. And so we spend a lot of time driving awareness and making people aware of the product and the solution and what it can solve for, but then also trying to help make that experience of considering the purchase as rich as possible for those consumers by the conversations that we have directly with them, but then also through our dealers and installers who, who we don't own, but who play a really important role in interfacing with the consumer. So yeah.
I mean, yes, that is somebody coming to your home. Often they have to actually get inside your home, even though it's an outdoor, it's a stationary outdoor generator. I know from experience, they have to come in, they have to kind of weave lines out through the inside of your home to the outside. It requires the connection, the electrical connection, et cetera. I mean, to your point, it's a minor construction project, and that's a pretty high threshold to get people past. Now, I loved how you started by saying, we we exist to give people peace of mind, right? That higher order purpose is so key, and I know a lot of marketers try to get to that place where they're thinking, I'm not just selling the product, I'm selling peace of mind, I'm selling quality of life, et cetera, et cetera. I'm selling time efficiency. You know what I mean? Whatever it might be. Um, but you still have to get people past that I really need this thing. And I guess my mind goes to, how much do you play off of fear? Because we're living at a time when, frankly, weather is so unpredictable and storms seem to come out of nowhere. And there's so many things, because it really is in a storm circumstance, primarily that a home would lose power. So, like, how do you have to tap into, that piece of it as a motivator to enable people to say, oh gosh, yeah, I can't be left stranded without power for, a string of days?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it is that fear of losing power that ultimately drives the purchase, right? And so there's a tension for us as marketers to say, how much do we want to play on that fear versus how much do we want to flip it and really talk about the benefit or the end state where you've sort of eliminated that. And what we've learned is we really have to do kind of both, right? So when consumers are in that moment where the power is out, it doesn't take much to get their interest, right? But then in a steady state kind of environment where the power is on, we do have to spend a little bit of time reminding them of the problem, right, that they've experienced in the past to help them get them in the right frame of mind, right? And then we start to talk about the benefit and how it can really help them. And we've really played with how much do we focus on the problem, versus how much do we focus on the benefit. And what we found is that depends a lot on the region of the country where you're in, what your recent experiences have been. And so we are continuing to become more nuanced in our communications to try to address that and really meet consumers where they are. And we have a lot of conversations with consumers, on our paid digital content around what they're experiencing and how they're feeling. And that's another place where we can do some sensing as to how, consumers are receiving what we're sharing in real time.
Yeah, it's funny, I know the folks at the Weather Channel, and over the years, they have data, right? Like, they, as a
Yeah.
company, they keep data, and they often have said, marketers, it would be in the best interest of marketers if they actually regarded weather data, because and sort of integrated that into their marketing
Yeah,
strategy, because being able to predict or see or, have a sense of that anticipation of weather patterns and things that might affect somebody's, a consumer's buying habits, life, or whatever. So I could see you all thinking about that as yet another data input when you
totally.
fashion out your
We
strategy.
have we actually have a meteorologist,
Oh,
on
really?
staff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because it is so critical to our business that having like one, you can listen to a lot of news sources, but having one voice that everybody in the company is gonna listen to coordinate against has proven to be really helpful. But then of course we're really leveraging data as well, and we continue to do research to understand the relationship between the weather and the outages. There's really good data in the US about, power outages that's really up to date. So we're constantly leveraging that data. But, and storms and things do cause power outages for sure, but they tend to overlap, but they aren't always, highly correlated because depending upon the region, the type of storm, you it can all result in, like, a very different power outage situation, so it is very difficult to predict how much demand will be generated by any given storm event, or other sort of outage related, activity. So that's a piece that we continue to build our capability and our knowledge there to help us forecast better and help us serve consumers better.
Yeah, no, I love that. I wanna get to this piece about, B2C versus B2B because you operate in both of those spheres. You know, just to finish, on the B2C side, this conversation we're assuming or we're supposing that how homes were built without generators. Obviously, and so yes, you're gonna go into communities and neighborhoods where houses were built and generators weren't part of the initial build. Then meanwhile, there's a lot of new construction happening all over the country and new developments, et cetera, where I would imagine that you getting in with construction firms and sort of being part and parcel of the build would also be ideal. How are you thinking about that and making sure those two different scenarios are met, in terms of market expansion?
Totally. Yeah. We have a team that's focused up against the builder channel, and we focus on building relationships with builders at both a centralized kind of level, but then also in a more decentralized context as well, as that, can sort of take place in small pockets or with smaller companies that are doing building. So we're definitely focused on that as well. There is more of our business at this point comes from those existing homes, which makes sense with obviously there's more existing homes than new homes being built every year. But we focus on both, and both of those are really big, continue to be big opportunities for the business.
And then meanwhile, on the B2B side, I mean, I think of schools, hospitals, office complexes, like, that's just a huge market for you as well, I'm sure. So how is that similar or different than the consumer market for you?
It is, yeah. In both of those markets, what we've really focused on doing is building an ecosystem of solutions that can help our customers both on the residential side and on the industrial side. So on the industrial side of the business, we really strive to be partners to businesses and helping them manage their energy needs. And so there's a lot of new use cases in that space as well as things like data centers become more relevant, taking considerably more energy, right? We want to be partners with companies that are building in that space, and we make a big impact serving people across many different types of industries, from hospitals to universities. So it really is almost like energy for everything. And a lot of industries, those buildings are required to have backup power, and we wanna be the solution, for those companies.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about now let's move because and just by the way, so fascinating. I mean, it's just such a complex and multifaceted industry when you think about it. Um, but you personally have B2C background, which I think is super interesting. You were at Michelin before, being in Generac, and before that you were at P&G. So,
Yes, 20 years.
overseeing brands like Oral-B. I mean, so you come from that universe, right? Where,
Right.
I mean, frankly, slightly more disposable products that are, a ready buy. It's about a point of purchase. The dynamics of the marketing and then the sale are vastly different. How have you thought about, well, tell me a little bit about your journey, how you got from point A to where you are now, and really what you've taken with you along the way?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One, this whole idea like a discretionary purchase and a purchase that requires education. I've had experience in those types of categories throughout my career. So, like Febreze, air fresheners, early in my career, it's an amazing brand, but it's really one of those things that you have to convince people, right, that they need it and keep reminding them. And then when I worked on Oral-B with the electric toothbrush, the manual toothbrush is really the standard of care in the US, right? And so helping educate people on how an electric toothbrush can do more for them, right? And can help improve their health. And so this, sort of generator business is sort of a page out of that book where it's something that it really helps to improve consumers' lives and and businesses sort of situations, right? But it requires a level of education and nurturing to help sort of get there. And I really think that that journey is something that is exciting to me to be able to sort of craft the plans and the communication along that journey. So that's been something that's been sort of a thread that I've sort of woven through. And the other piece that I spent 20 years in B2C at P&G in a company that truly plays to win. And looking back, some of the roles that I got most excited about were ones where I had the opportunity to really build and transform, working in on our new business side of the company, or in Oral-B where we were able to double the revenue on that electric toothbrush business just by really, growing the category. And so as I left P&G, I went to Michelin, I did a bunch of consulting, I stumbled across Generac, and it's been a wildly successful company, growing from, $1 billion or so 5 years ago to now more than 4 billion. And so there's been a tremendous amount of growth with which has sort of given us the privilege to transform to meet our customers' needs on a larger scale and to offer a broader suite of products, both on the residential and the industrial side, to increase that customer lifetime value. And so it's that foundation of, like, strong success and growth that sort of gives us the right to sort of transform to that next phase, and that's a really interesting, like, foundation or platform to build on. When the company's been wildly successful and it's like, how do we get to that next phase of growth, is exciting.
What do you attribute all the success to, and how much are you claiming has been marketing's role?
Yeah, I mean, I think historically the company has been super successful because, in part, the solutions that we offer are have become quite relevant, right, in the market as power outage hours in the U.S. have gone up, and there's less stability in the power space, right, and so that's definitely been a piece of it, and and then Generac really created some of these categories, right? And so I think the company has a really strong foundation in consumers and businesses' minds where it's really trusted as a backup power solution when other solutions aren't working for you, right? So there's a lot of trust there. And so what we've been trying to do from a brand standpoint is build on that, and frame it more as energy solutions that are really giving you, like, the freedom to use power on your terms, and helping people see how our full portfolio of products can do that. And the marketing team has done a lot of transformation in the past couple of years that has helped to continue that momentum.
Tell me about your team. Tell me about how you're set up internally. How big a team do you have? I'm sure you can't share budget numbers, but how are you thinking about the marketing organization within the company? When you came in, what was it like? What have you done over the years that you've been there? And kind of tell me what resources you have at your disposal now.
Yeah, most definitely. So from a marketing perspective, we've positioned ourselves as sort of leading the change within the company to becoming a sort of energy solutions provider and impacting the top and bottom line of the company in a meaningful way. And so my function is comprised of a lot of sub functions and is a little bit broader than some of the traditional definition of marketing. We have a lot of the traditional functions, but we also have a large customer support team. It turns out that at that time those times when the power goes out, a lot of new consumers and businesses are interested in our products, but it's also a time when people who own our current products have a lot of questions, right? And so we sort of get it on both fronts, and we really amp up in terms of our efforts to support our existing customers during those moments as well. And then the team also owns the pricing, and value realization for the company. And so we've really focused on how do we generate more profits, right? And how do we look at pricing ecosystems and services, in addition to the products that we've traditionally, the hardware that we've traditionally sold as a company, which of course we, continue to pursue, but thinking about how do we continue to evolve in terms of how we generate revenue.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So you're helping to come up with the product bundles basically, or the ways of thinking about, the
Yeah,
offerings and I love,
exactly.
yeah, the concept of pricing ecosystems.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's been exciting.
So I know you personally, and I want to come back to your leadership style in a minute. I know you personally, you went to Purdue undergrad, you went to the University
Mhm.
of Chicago for your MBA. Um, Classically educated marketer, would you say?
Sure, let's go with that. Yeah.
Okay, now fill in the blanks and tell me the nuance, because I do believe, I think it's maybe just about half of CMOs have MBAs. Tell me a little bit about your education journey. Like, do you always want to go into marketing, number one, but did you always aspire to be a CMO?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't always aspire to be a CMO, but I did early in my career. I think I recognized that I wanted to be in marketing because I definitely see that connection between human behavior and psychology, and then the consumers and the end users that we're doing business with, right? And that piece of it is really exciting and interesting to me. But I'd say from an educational standpoint, the schools I tend there's definitely like a focus on data,
Engineering, Purdue has
engineering, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so the way I approach marketing is from a data-driven perspective, but also from a business perspective. I'm kind of a business person first and then a marketer second, and I think the combination of those 2 is really important in the job I have today, and in that's the sort of the types of situations from a business perspective where I can add the most value. And it's fun to be able to connect that marketing to the business because at the end of the day, like the marketing's role is to drive revenue and profits.
Totally, and you're ahead of the game if that's the case, because listen, I mean, that's what the dialogue is out there all the time, which is that marketers need to, you know, um, drive the business case for marketing, full stop, and they have to drive the reason for marketing being a deeply supported part of any given organization, and they have to prove out how marketing is directly driving the business forward, not just the brand awareness and some of those softer metrics. So the fact that you come at it with a business first, business person first lens, that really is what I think every marketer, if they're not already doing, knows they should be doing. I mean, I guess, and we don't have all the time in the world on this particular call, but, I mean, you have to get buy-in, and how have you been able to make sure that your CEO and your CFO see you as that, right? See you as that kind of asset in the C-suite, and not just because we all hear the stories of, marketing being cut first when times are tight or tough, when the reality is that is the growth engine. But if there's a breakdown of communication or recognition about the power of marketing, it's unfortunately it's a, defeats the purpose, right? I mean, it creates a bad situation for the company, and the opposite ironically ends up happening. So touch on, your internal dialogue with the folks that you work with, and anything you made to have to be real for you to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I came from a start in CPG where marketing was highly valued. And I feel like, at Generac, while it's a little bit of a different business, marketing is also highly valued. And I think it comes down to just like the value that the team is bringing to the company every day in terms of helping to make the business more successful, right? And that can show up in a lot of different ways. And then making sure that the dollars that we invest and the investments that we make are choiceful, but that we see an impact from those and a return on that investment. And so, I think as long as you sort of keep that in mind, and I think it's also important too that the company recognizes that yes, marketing and investing in consumers and in users is driving the business, right? When you work with people who recognize that, I think the job of the marketer becomes a lot easier, right? But I think you can build from that foundation to then continue to add value across a broader range of ways that you can contribute as an organization. And I think my team has been delivering on that, and so I'm proud of them for that, and I have a great team, of people that, a lot of them are new and learning how to work together, and it's been a really fun journey.
Well, that's a perfect segue for my next question, which is you use the word team, and let's imagine for a minute that that's a literal team, a literal soccer team on a field. If that's the metaphor for your team, who are you on that field? Are you the striker trying to, like, aggressively score goals? Are you in the midfield trying to keep be the connective tissue between the offense and defense? Or are you at the back protecting the goal at all costs from your competitive onslaught?
Yeah, like my six-year-old daughter on the soccer field,
There
I
you
think I
go.
am a midfielder,
I love that.
so she also yeah.
Tell about her
Yeah.
and then tell me about that.
Well, she's a midfielder through and through, she really thrives in that position, but, but for me, yeah, I'd say I have this team that, is largely new. They've been in the company, less than 2 years, and so they're learning the company, they're learning how to work, how to really work together, they're learning each other, and so a lot of my job is to make the connections, between those team members and bridge and help them work together, and that gets more and more sophisticated every day as they continue to build their relationships. And then I'd say that same dynamic exists on another plane with my peers, right? Where we have a lot of different business groups and people who are leading different aspects of the company. And so I think marketing is uniquely positioned as the group that really touches the consumers and the customers to be a bridge in a lot of those conversations. And so that's a role that I can play with my peers, depending upon the context as well, which I feel like is more of that midfielder, connective tissue type of role. So yeah.
Love that. I get a variety of answers to that question, and I think that's the strongest case for being a midfielder, which I frankly played when I played soccer as well. I do love your analysis of that and your selection of that. But again, I've had a lot of different answers to that question. Um, Last quick question, Amanda, is who's next? Who else should I have on this podcast? I'd love for you to recommend to me somebody who a brand CMO, either B2B, B2C, somebody you admire, somebody whose work you think is extraordinary, and you could either know this person really well or you might just admire them from afar.
Yeah, there's a couple people that I know really well who I think could be interesting. I work on this business that I work on is sold to people who are a little bit older, right? They're maybe more established, they own a home. But one thing I think is so interesting is a lot of these brands that are really focused on younger consumers and much closer to pop culture and in that space. So Zena Arnold, she's the CMO of Sephora, and then Debbie Beiswanger, she, is SVP of marketing at Dutch Bros, which is a coffee company that, a coffee shop, if you will, that's that's really growing rapidly. They're based in Arizona, and I think just the dialogue sometimes that I hear between them is so interesting to me, right? Because they're really playing in a different space and with a different set of consumers than my world where I'm sort of operating every day. So I think that could be interesting. I'd like to listen to
I
that.
love that. Well, we'll make that happen for you. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure our listeners have loved listening to you. And I really look forward to meeting you in person, hopefully soon, and continuing the
Yeah,
conversation. And thank you so much for the insight.
yeah, totally. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you.
Likewise, take care.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Marketing Vanguard, part of the Adweek Podcast Network and Acast Creator Network. This podcast was produced by Jordan Pretano, executive produced by Al Manarino and John Heil, and edited by Lane McGibney at Boutwell Studios. You can listen and subscribe to all of Adweek's podcasts by visiting adweek.com/podcasts. Stay updated on all things Adweek Podcast Network by following us on Twitter at Adweek Podcasts. And if you have a question or suggestion for the show, send us an email at podcast@adweek.com. Thanks for listening.